think of the pay piggies, so to give them
Right.
the spicier content.
Premium content. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Exactly. 100. See, this is why I wanted to bring you on, because you understand these things.
You need to have enough time and space for the magic to happen.
Yeah, exactly. See, you understand these things. But anyways, I don't know. For introductions, I mean, a lot of people that a lot of people know who you are, but it seems, I don't know, you're kind of an enigmatic figure. You're sort of everywhere, but you're nowhere at the same time, Indian. Um, you've gained a lot of notoriety. I noticed. Well, I don't know. I mean, who has notoriety nowadays? But but I guess the introduction question I always start with is, besides, like, it's been a while since we talked, but how have you been, my friend? And also, how did you start posting? What do you do? There's a lot of mystery surrounding you, actually. I don't think there's been a lot of clear, sort of like a journalistic, who are you? What do you do? How did you come here? What day has it been? What coin do you have? Is it your 13th? Well, it goes 12 steps. 13th step is your own.
Right. Yeah. What's my system for staying white pilled? Well, so I was grown in a lab in a little bit away from Langley, Virginia, and
No.
I was created to insinuate myself into the tech VC right wing sphere. It's a deliberate project of the Soros Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative. These are my back.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah. I'm my blood type is clean. No, I mean, I don't know. I'm a guy on Twitter. I just post a lot. Yeah, that is truly my official capacity. I'm an opinionated person who posts a lot on Twitter.
That's good. Because I don't know, there's sort of like there's always like rumors about posters. Like, you've been to NatCon, you've been here and there.
Yeah.
You've been in the Yarvin Circle. Have you been to the Yarvin Dungeon? Have you attended the Yarvin booster parties? Or
I have not attended the Yarvin booster parties. I like Curtis. He's a good guy. He's a very smart man. In many ways, I think the online modern right owes a lot to his posting. I think he would also describe himself as a guy that posts a lot on the internet.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. So it's less like what's your objective? What's your end game here? And it's more like, if you have observations about the world and how it works, and you have the ability to post about them, posters post. It's really that simple.
That's true. Posters post. I think like the clarity of posting will see you through. But I guess, like, before we get into a lot of the usual topics you talk about, because you're sort of at, I noticed like a number of different intersections when it comes to the quote unquote like discourse TM, whether it's I promised myself I wanted to talk less about it, but I guess it's like you can't look away the sort of like dating relationship discourse, but also like you had a great presentation I was listening to on Martyr Maid's podcast about immigration, which is another thing you talk about. But I guess before that, let's talk about the Silicon Valley thing. It seems that like there's this general turn towards but it seems you've covered like the whole spread in terms of your posting. But before we get to that, I just wanted to talk about like the nature of this like weird Silicon Valley like tech bro turn, not just in the E-right, but also in general. It seems to be that's where a lot of the discourse comes from. And I wonder, like, there's a lot of positives and negatives to that. But I wonder, like, what is this relationship between, I mean, we mentioned Yarvin, like, there's some obvious answers, but like, what is this relationship between like,
how come you can go into I think an easy way to think about this is like, how come you can go into a Twitter space and you can see, people who have been like Solo Forum posters, Amarna posters, how come you can see these people and then like, sort of like 2017 E-right people and like, random movement figures and like some guy that works at like, Bessemer Venture, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
how come you can see like this weird coincidence of like Silicon Valley tech, online e-right, paleocons, like what's going on here? I think at like a fundamental level, you know, the U.S. as a polity, and obviously you're Canadian, but it's like the American polities, reach extends into Canada as well. We care
Definitely.
we care about what Trudeau does. Trudeau cares about what we do. This North American continent, all of the promises that it held, all of the material and demographic and social and cultural promises that it held don't seem to have manifest in the way that people thought they were going to. Right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
If you look at kind of the emergence of the modern world as we know it, it's really a post-war thing, even maybe more so a post-Cold War thing. For someone who is coming up in the 50s and 60s, someone who is in their prime in 1959 or 1962, or someone who is in their prime in 1998, they would have a particular view of American destiny. They wouldn't agree with each other, but they were probably pretty much more optimistic than we are. And now we have these two periods, the post-war period and the post-Cold War period, where it's like you feel like America's on the surge of new greatness. You feel like the project is going well, but if you look closely, it's like, hey, wait a minute, how come this metro area speaks Spanish instead of English? Or like, why are there so many homeless people in San Francisco? Or like, how come we can't go to the moon anymore, right? Then you look around at the rest of it, and it's like, trillions of dollars in the economy. There are unicorns everywhere, and everyone has these magical cell phones, and technology is getting better and better because our ads are super optimized, and and then you look even closer, and it's like, well, but wait a minute, if this is all true, how come the American Rust Belt is like getting hollowed out? How come there more and more young people committing suicide? How come everyone's using opioids? Why is everything about like
politics of identity and sexuality?
Yeah, it's like how come being a normal person is like racist and evil now? How come being proud of my ancestors is like not allowed? Like what the vent? And everyone kind of looks around at this and gets quote red pilled in their own way. There's this great old phrase where it's like a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged by reality.
Yeah.
It's like once you've bitten the forbidden fruit, it's like you can't quite look at things the same way again. You have this discontent, and I think there are different ways that people arrive at it, right? So someone who someone whose life is very fancy, let's say someone who went to like Stanford, and then they went to work in like a tech company, and then they made a lot of money, and then they did angel investing, and then they went to become a partner at a venture firm, and they're like it's a very refined way of living. They look around at the world and they're like, why are there just drug addicts all over the place that I live? How come there is someone trying to turn my son into a daughter in his like expensive private school? Like, what is happening? That person is kind of late to the game, but they have a lot of resources. They're very aware about these problems, and what they struggle to understand is how things got this way, because their whole lives have been box checking and doing what's expected of them and working in this system that produces a lot of material bounty, and yet they can't control things, right?
Yeah.
The richest man on the planet, and this is I'm trying to speak to like the perspective of like the E-right, because the E-right I think is like rightly worried that these people are insidious. They're trying to co-opt the movement. They want to turn it into something else. It's like, and that's a very real fear. It's a very rational fear. It's exactly what happened to Trump. It's exactly what happened to Brexit, and it's happened repeatedly to right-wing movements, right? So it's not a bad fear to have. The richest man in the world, incredibly accomplished, very wealthy, massively socially powerful, Elon Musk, even he had one of his kids attacked in this way, right? Even he lost a kid to this thing. So like, that makes people sit up and notice, right? Even if they can insulate themselves in all other ways, even if they can just, with spending very little of their net worth, spend massive amounts of money and cover up all of these problems, even they are still attacked at this level. And the thing about parents is that no matter how liberal they are, and I'm using liberal in sort of the wishy-washy sense, just no matter how accommodating they are, no matter how
of the social discourse,
no matter how frou-frou they are or whatever, basically all parents love their kids, and someone who's their kid's life is they hate that. And there's just a lot of that going on, so that's what kind of motivates them. And are they late to the game? Absolutely. Do they have lots of material commitments around immigration and corporatism that are actually direct feeders into these problems through our political process? Yes, absolutely, right. But they don't know, they know that the political regime as it exists now is bad. They don't know how to navigate to something else, and what they really are afraid of is the idea that correcting anything of these things that they dislike requires them to be cruel and brutal and evil. And if there's any piece of advice that I can give to the E-right, it's imagine the secretive billionaires want to, ally with you, and they want to fix these problems, and they really want to get at the root of them. They have a lot to lose. You have basically nothing to lose. You're gonna kind of have to meet them halfway.
That's
try not to make it impossible for them to work with you. Okay.
Well, that's true. It's like that phrase a lot of people are saying, in the Kali Yuga, you must close your heart off to pity, and I grow sympathetic to that phrase. The saying that the normies are sort of 10 or 15 years behind the chuds is very real in a way. But I think when it comes to Silicon Valley, what's very interesting is that there tends to be criticisms depending on what sector of the E-right you're coming from. The criticisms that they're basically libertarians and transhumanists, and that they really don't have the same concerns as the chud on the ground, or there are a lot of these post-rationalist people that really just have their own form of technocracy. But at the same time, I mean, then of course there's the general criticism of Curtis Yarvin as well.
Sure. Yeah. There's this amazing cartoon. Let me know if you can find it again. DM it to me on Twitter. It's what are the future American castes? And it's there are Deo Hapas, and they're the Mennonite Latinos, and then there are the and then they're just essentially the great melange of Black and Latino and global South, Shudras or whatever. And it's that's kind of a low resolution but accurate view. But the thing is, it's do they have their own interests and inclinations and desires and stuff like that? And it's they do. And to pretend that they don't is just dishonest. To the extent that those own desires are incompatible and morally evil and actually contradictory to what many sectors of the E-right want, I think that's kind of overblown. Sometimes people sometimes people are antagonistic to the idea of ideological fellow travelers because they're I'm right. So if someone disagrees with me, they're saying I'm wrong, and that means they're my enemy. And it's there are options besides enemy and friend. There are people who you can be friendly with. There are people that you can work with. To have collegial relationships doesn't mean that you're married. People that work together and people who are spouses and family members, those are actually pretty different relationships. And for a very long time, think of the Birchers. Think of the Birchers, or think about Buchananites,
Oh yeah.
Think about people who, they
Classic
called it.
paleocons.
Yeah, they called it in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, the decades and decades and decades of saying, hey, actually, this is all crazy what we're doing. Why are we deracinating our countries? Why are we, destroying our heritage? Why are we replacing our national stock? Why are we doing these things? These are bad. Those people have been right about some, or like all of the LGBTQ stuff, right? They were all right about all of these things. They have not been listened to. They have been marginalized. They have been, targeted for reprisal for so long. And so it's understandable that, they see their memes, they see their ideas, they see their, they see all these things being suddenly used by outsiders. And it's a completely understandable, justifiable reaction to say, these people, we don't need them. They're entryists. They suck. They're actually directly responsible for a lot of these problems. Like,
oh yeah,
I get it, right? But not all of them. and
no.
like, and frankly, like a lot of these, a lot of the E-right, it's like if they could have been part of those things, they actually would have done the same stuff. For the same
the
reason
failed
that
normie. There's a lot of us failed normies on the E-right that I feel like goes underlooked in a way.
Yeah, and I don't want to like be an asshole about this because it's like, it's isomorphic to the same thing where someone's like, oh, you're not an incel because you're Christian. You're an incel because you can't get laid. If you were a real Chad, you would be a degenerate too. And it's like,
we'll talk about that later because that's yeah.
It's a similar thing where it's like, that's not always true. It's often true. it is often true, right? And so like I think I have no prescriptions for the E-right. Like I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. But what I'll say is like, if you're motivated by principle and you're not motivated by resentment, and I know lots of E-rightists know me. There are many people who are fundamentally motivated by deep principle.
Oh yeah.
If you're motivated by principle and not resentment, you shouldn't make yourself repulsive to people that can help you.
Yeah.
Because even if they only want half of what you want, you should still work with them.
In a failing system, it's almost a necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, but then, there is like optics cucking and all that, like to be play devil's advocate. But at the same time, like I feel like any association, like there are people, they're like dedicated A-log accounts on the political left who like, well, I don't know, they'll link Mark Andreessen, like they'll do the monkey chain associations till they find like a Graper account or whatever, or some weirdo conspiracy that like Silicon Valley bros are funding quote unquote like dark right-wing money, and then Russia's involved, and it's all this crazy,
it's like it's there's always
the Thiel Network, of course. I mean, that's real. I mean, this podcast is sponsored by the Thiel Network.
Exactly. We're all on Peter's payroll. No, I mean, the left, they to talk about that a little bit, like, think about the names of the two sides in World War II. You have the Axis and you have the Allies.
Yeah.
And the idea of an Axis is a centrally controlled, axis, this intersection of powers that's like centralized and directed, and like, hey, Hirohito, you need to attack now, and then Mussolini, you do this, and then we'll get him on from this side, right? That's the mental mindset of an axis of powers. That's not what the Axis were like at all, actually.
Oh, God,
they were just like they had, first of all, the first, like the whole like read the book Icebreaker, read about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and its dissolution. Like, these people were not, they were not a centralized axis of powers by any means, right? Whereas you look at the Allies, the narrative that the Allies, i.e. the civilization that won, the Anglo-liberalism, the yoke that we live under today, they told a story of like all of these different people coming together, and they're just, working in tandem, but they're allies. They're not like,
they're holding hands singing "We Are the World."
And it's like, no, actually, like, they were a central axis, working in concert, I think at one point Montgomery actually had command of U.S. troops, right? It's like,
Yeah.
Um, and this kind of projection is what's happening when the left says, "Oh, Peter Thiel is using his dark money to fund e-right posters." It's like they are actually funded by Soros in that way.
Exactly.
So they see like an inkling of that on the other side, and they're like, "Oh my God, there's a vast right-wing conspiracy," and like, I got to tell you, no, there ain't. It's like if only.
If only,
Yeah. There really isn't, but there should be. It's like, the broke is like it never happened. Woke, maybe it happened. Bespoke, it totally should have happened.
It's happening. It's a good thing, actually.
Yeah. It's like, whether you're describing historical events or future potentialities, it's like, the bespoke is like it's good and it should have happened. It's like that is kind of the mindset that I think the right the right, when I say quote the right, what does that even mean? I think it's people who look around at the world as it is and they see the trajectory that it's on and they're like, this is highly entropic, this is perverted, this is f***ed up, and I don't want it to be like this. With some time evolution arrow, the earlier was better because it was more ordered, and the later is worse because it's more disordered. And it's
that's a good way to look at it. I mean, these political categories are they're meaningful, but they're like meaningful in a postmodern sense of like, what is the right, what is the left? They're vague sort of categories of sentiment in some ways.
Yeah. And like a trap that a lot of people get caught in is they're like, well, if the time evolution of all of these events and all of these conditions is going from what I would like to what I would not like in some sense, well, then I have to go back. I have to turn back the clock, right? And not to I'm being unfair because I think he's probably a little bit more sophisticated than this. I don't call myself a conservative for this reason. Samuel Francis had this wonderful quote, call yourself an America firster, call yourself a nationalist, but don't call yourself a conservative. That doesn't mean anything anymore. There's nothing to conserve. And frankly, a lot of things about the status quo ante led us to the status quo. You see this all the time with like aesthetic posting accounts where they're like, shouldn't models look like this again? That's like some chick with like her tits out or whatever. And it's like, there is a direct line from it being acceptable for someone's wife or daughter to just like have her tits out like that and like pennies. Like there's a direct line from like the actual incontinence of like, public behavior to like the trans. If you don't understand it, like just stop posting. like you're not gonna, it's like we don't want to go back to that. We want to go to something new. Like the phrase that I use, because it's a little provocative, people don't like it, and so so it's a little bit fun to use, is right-wing progressive. I consider myself a right-wing progressive. I am for order. I am for the maintenance and the evolution of people as they are. I think different groups of people have their own destinies that they need to achieve, and their own uplifting.
Right.
And
their own life world that they must come into being with.
Yeah. And to cultivate those things and physical spaces, aesthetic movements, families, to create these things is a forward, upward journey. It is progressive. It is idealistic. I just don't think it should be high entropy. I think it should be lower in entropy than not. And that's why I say right-wing progressive. It's like I don't think you can rewind the clock in any way. You have to find a way to move forward. And to me, if I can indulge in a little ethnocentrism, to me, like, everyone from like Joe Kent. Joe Kent?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome American, just amazing guy. He's descended from like old stock Americans that came here in the 1600s. He's a special forces soldier. His wife was a Navy cryptanalyst. She's a war. These people are they are the kshatriya class. They are literal warriors. They're if you look at and there's so much reporting about this. If you look at the kinds of people who join the American military, the kinds of people who become police, it's just family lineages. They're all related to one another. They intermarry with them. Like these are remarkable people.
Well, their relatives fought significant in almost every significant conflict in America. Some of them,
yeah. It's like, these people are a caste unto themselves, and they're
ejastics,
yeah, and it's like, this work, you're never going to have a lot of them in any society, but you'll always have some of them, and you'll always have people who are, they have that pugnacity, they have that fire in their bellies where they want to set things right, and the thing is, it's like, are they necessarily really, really good at making a lot of money and building companies and raising money and hiring good people and building products and stuff? Like, no, right? But it's like, that's not, but they're really good at what they do. They're a fundamentally vital part of society. They're a minority of society, but it's like they are the driving force of civilizational achievement, right? Like,
right.
John Glenn, like the kind of people who become fighter pilots and astronauts, right? Like that's who these people are. Then you have like kind of the Vaishyas, right? You have people who are very commerce minded, who are very business minded. You have people who, they look for opportunities. They can change everything to make a buck, right? This is a lot of people. Lot of people, right? A lot of people, that kind of fit into this world where it's like, they're just, they're here to make money. They're here to work, but it's still not even the majority, right? It's just much larger. And then you have Shudras. The thing is, people use the term Shudra in an unkind way.
Well, it's like an insult almost.
It's like an insult. It's like, oh, you're a shitty lesser kid. No. Like, someone who like builds a building is a Shudra. Okay, like someone who like, someone who keeps the electrical grid going is a Shudra, right? Like, you can, people can laugh at the garbage man. Just see what happens if he stops, picking up the garbage. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
what if the sanitation worker? What if Peter Nemitz just didn't decide to go to work one day?
Yeah. Peter Nimitz is an American Shudra. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you think that that's an insult, you're not thinking about this. It's like,
but that's his day job. I think he's more than a shooter. I mean, he's a scholar himself. But yeah,
he is. Yeah, no, and this is an important thing. It's like, this has nothing to do with IQ. This has nothing to do with your it's.
But look at those old aging boomers that work in water treatment plants or nuclear power plants or whatnot.
Yeah.
What if life existed without them? What would happen to civilization?
Yeah, it's like you don't have civilization. They are literally, in the classical Indian way of talking about this, the feet of the body are the Shudras. It's literally the thing that it's the thing supporting the entire body. It is the basis of that civilization, right? And then, to a very small degree, you have to tolerate some Brahmins. Sorry.
Yeah, that's just going to happen. It's inevitable.
And it's like, how many are you going to have? Is everyone going to be a Brahmin? Probably not, right? And like, frankly, a society composed entirely of Brahmins would be insufferable.
Well, in a way, with the education system in North America, like the boomer expectation of it, it's almost as if the aspirational qualities is to be maybe not a Brahmin, to certainly be Brahmin adjacent or some form of culture industry worker or whatnot. Yeah.
Imagine being trapped in a room the rest of your life where all people talk about are ideas, and it's just like, oh my God. For a lot of people, and frankly, for a lot of Brahmins, this would be worse than torture, right? It's just like, but you do, like, every society does have essentially some small number of people who are effectively advisors to the Kshatriyas, right? Directors of the Vaishyas, and like, clients and stakeholders of the output of Shudras, right?
Right.
Like, they themselves are not, they're not building anything, they're not financing anything, they're not fighting for anything, but they are using those things to kind of like run the show. And like, it's a very hoity-toity thing to say, but like, It exists. Sorry, if this idea offends you, you might actually be a liberal. Like,
Oh boy.
just being honest. Like, it's, if this idea offends you, you might be more of an egalitarian than you think.
Yeah.
And,
But these are like meta types in society that are applicable
yeah,
everywhere. And like you
totally.
were saying, like
Yeah,
it's almost Heideggerian, like the destiny of each civilization or each grouping has its own life world that they must aspire to. And then eventually that withers and fades. I mean, that's almost like what Spangler was saying. But yeah, go ahead. You had another point.
yeah. No, so it's like, how do you fit these sort of different castes together from disparate peoples to sort of forge something, right? Because it's
Right.
like, if you look at the American body politic, if you look at Americans as an ethnos, which you can read if you just search from Indian Bronson and just do like American ethnos or like ethnic Americans, you can read all of my posts about this, right? They are an ethnic nation of people, in the
Yeah.
same way that France and Germany. If you go to 23, like Google 23andMe France German ethnicity, and 23andMe has this funny explainer page where they kind of invoke Charlemagne a little bit and they gloss over the history, but they're like, yeah, sorry, we know that you have these two very distinct national identities, but you're all just Franks.
Yeah.
It's like, but if you can consider the time from like Charlemagne to the Treaty of Verdun, and the sort of the emergence of East and West Francia into France and Germany. If you can think of that, it's like, look at how much time passes between the birth of Virginia Dare or the founding of Jamestown and the modern day. It's pretty clear that there's been American ethnogenesis, right? Australians are the same way. Australians are their own. Australians and Americans are these two Anglo nations descended from the English, and they're just distinct at this point. Anyways, so what I'm saying is, if you look at this nation of Americans, what you notice is that it has basically the best Kshatriyas in the world. It has the best Vaishyas in the world. It has, frankly, the best Shudras in the world too. It has the worst problems in the world. They're so bad, right? It's like, if you look at a city like San Francisco, or if you look at a state like California, and it's like, how do you have these problems? Right? It's like what are you doing?
Right at your doorstep,
right?
too.
Whose fault is this? Right? It's not the fault of the Kshatriyas. It's not the fault of the Vaishyas. It is absolutely not the fault of the Shudras. You can go to almost any American town and the tap water is drinkable, right?
Right.
The places where you can't, it's like there's some real Brahmin malfeasance going on.
Ironically, the places with the most concentration of like new money and wealth and political power.
Yeah. It's like these are the places that just go crazy, right? So it's like, how does this happen? How do you get this sort of elite destruction? Well, the Boston Brahmin types, the so-called WASP elite, it's not looking so hot for them, right? Skull and Bones is not really producing. It's not what it once was. I'll say that.
Oh yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, if you go to Nyack, there are a lot of people with funny last names there. No, it's not a bunch of old New York families anymore.
There's not a lot of people named Longfellow anymore.
Right. Yeah. Not so many Cabots, not so many Peabodys. I think there's an inherent problem in, and this is very Kaczynski-esque, I'm obviously ripping him off. There's an inherent problem with like obtaining comfort where victory ruins you. It kind of makes your elites flabby and weak and unfocused and lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Once they've won, it's like, well, why do we need to try anymore? And it makes a society sick and kind of ripe for, the ingress of these foreign elements. Obviously, I speak of the many 20th century social reformers in the U.S. I think everyone knows what I mean.
Well, the post-civil rights regime.
Yeah,
and then let's face it, for the audience, I have family members who, like, on my father's side, who've been here for like 100 years, but we're both products of like Ellis Islanders. Let's be real right now. My mother literally went through Ellis Island, so yeah.
Yeah, and you ended up in Canada? Sorry, dude.
I know, man.
It's okay. It's
because I had a great uncle that was here.
Yeah,
so that's how it goes. Yeah.
Based. Yeah, right. Like, it makes the society susceptible. And then you have these, the Lazar Freres, the Union Club types. It's like you don't get the same love. You don't have this amour propre. You don't have this the same noblesse oblige for
Right.
the people that you really ought to. And that's but think of all of the people who, in the bloom of their youth and then into their decrepitude as boomers, just went along with everything.
Yes.
Everything from the
Yeah.
1960s to the 1990s. They went along with everything. And Ross Perot stands up there on the stage and he's like, there'll be a great sucking sound of industry going to Mexico. And they just laugh at him. And then they elect Bush, and they just, they really,
the foundation before with Reagan and Paul Volcker and people like that.
Yeah. It's like, victory kills you in some sense. And, how do you undo that? I don't think you can rely. I don't think you can go back in time and there's no way to time travel and go back to 1954 and be like, listen, Mr. Eisenhower, I just got out of this time machine. You got to listen to me.
You're gonna be shocked that man-made horror is beyond your dreams.
Yeah. Everyone that likes Adlai Stevenson, you got to shoot him now. It's like, it's.
I slightly like Ike less. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
I mildly enjoy Ike. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what are you supposed to do? Go to the Constitutional Convention and be like, listen, guys.
This is the Pandora's box. This was it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't restore the world in this way. It doesn't work.
But you were go ahead. I have a point about Silicon Valley, but go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah. No. Just make your point. It's probably.
Well, I was going to ask. It was a question though. I was going to ask, like you mentioned before, to backtrack a little bit about the sort of like the starting of this conversation was the promises of like the American century being like fetid and withered on the vine. Do you think that the reason that there is so much of an emphasis on Silicon Valley, for good or for bad nowadays, even in the dissident corridors, whatever you call them, that is because they embody sort of like I know this is like probably maybe not true, but do they embody some sort of like that cavalier frontier?
They're the last people.
Yeah.
This is gonna really, Zero HP is gonna block me after I said no.
Oh,
we love him. They're the last people with a Faustian spirit.
Oh my god! Yeah,
Listen. Look at and I Incel Freak is DMing me right now. He's just calling me all sorts of slurs. Listen, I know how cringy that sounds, but it's like, think about how the world has been fundamentally changed in terms of what you spend your time doing, how you think about things, who you talk to, what you do, what you buy, how you shop. Think about all of those changes. How many of them flow through Silicon Valley?
Well, they own space more than anybody now, really.
Yeah. How many of them flowed through the hardware that you use, the software on it that you use, the meta operating systems of social networks and e-commerce and all of these things? Like, how much of that did you create, and how much of it did these people create?
Yeah.
It's like they look at the world in that way, where they're like, oh, there's a term called TAM, total addressable market, and the sort of the byline of doing anything is like, it's not worth doing unless you can have tens of millions of users, unless you can have hundreds of million in revenue, and frankly, it should be going for billions, right? You should be going for global scale, right?
It must become viral, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the whole ideology is like, oh, I don't want a little bit of success. I want fucking all of it, right? Like that kind of that is a will to power. They are the wanderer above the mists in the photo in that way. And like you can hate them, you can find them very contemptible. You can find the idea of optimizing ads to sell more dog food to more people useless, and it kind of is useless. But like, but they have that drive, and it's basically the only part of America that has done really, really well over the last 20 or 30 years has been the internet, has been software. starting now AI, right? Like, we don't really lead the world in steel production,
No,
right? Like,
no.
it's the titans of industry are not standard oil guys. There are no great pioneer wars to fight against the Indian savages. Like, this is the Indian savages are now just like the guys showing up and being like, yes, I type scalar very well. Like that's it's things have changed, and like in a way it's like there's been the shift of Tianming from kind of the sort of sleepy North Coast elites to these people, right? And these people, they look around at their government and society, and they're like, if you do a lot of work in this area, like, you look at government bureaucrats and you just feel utter contempt for them, because it's like, how are you guys so bad at your jobs? We could do way better, right? And like, that's where the political adjacency comes from. That's where the exploration of new ideas comes from. Are they fundamentally libertarian? Yeah. You know who the most libertarian person is? The king. The king is the maximist libertarian. No one gets to tell him what to do. He's a sovereign, right? That impulse is definitely there. And, I think it would be unwise to write it all off.
Yeah.
Well,
there are criticisms. I mean, like, Faustine does not automatically mean like a good thing. It also
it doesn't. It doesn't.
Conquest for open space.
Yeah, a lot of migrants flooding into Europe have a Faustian spirit too.
That'll get hammered right there.
The new steppe barbarians, Turks in Germany. It's this male mediated, high fertility, Chad energy. It's just like, these Germans are being like, oh, I don't know if we can have nuclear power, and then the Turk Chad is like, how do I repopulate Bavaria?
Just to be clear, I do not endorse this view. This is entirely Vinnie Bronson. I think like the migrant situation is interesting, because eventually I think there will be I mean, they're already starting to. There's already a lot of like, hojabis, and their birth rates are probably going to plummet.
It's true. It's true. Sometimes you get the demon mystery cult to worship Indra. Sometimes the demon mystery cult gets you to worship, Vanakam, or it's like it's sorry. Dravidian
yeah, the cult
bros.
of Slaanesh.
sorry, Dravidian bros. It's like. Who's Murugan? Where did this Murugan guy come from? I don't recognize Murugan in the Vedas. It doesn't sound like Rudra to me. Sometimes the demon mystery cult, that you're intending to conquer, exercises some influence of its own. So, I mean, like, this is I think the fundamental tension between peoples, between their life worlds that they create, you can look at this fractally. You can look at this, within an organization when new hires come in. You can look at this between migrant groups. You can look at this between man and woman. There are always these negotiations of identity and its material basis, its spiritual basis, what wins seems to be what wins. I get, but
that being said, like, what wins, what seems to win, like, I noticed the criticism, I think, which is valid, of this group of people would be the sort of, I know I'm casting shade at him, but like someone like Richard Hanania, right? Like someone who, like, this sort of like, well, whatever works, and if like global liberalism works, then it's will to power, it works. Like,
right.
I feel like it negates the sort of values that like a diverse array of people share. And I feel like a lot of people, they sort of typecast Silicon Valley as having this very like utilitarian brain instrumentalized mentality. I mean, not everybody. There's I'm sure even like Elon Musk has deeply held well, maybe not, but like he has deeply held beliefs on,
I think he does,
certain issues. But
no,
but you know what I mean? Like the sort of Hanania, like whatever works, and if global liberalism or Turbo America can work, then it's like, why fight it?
Richard is often just having a little bit of fun on Twitter. So like, here's the thing. When you see him replying to some woman being insufferable, and he's like, "You go, girl," he's not really saying that. I want to defend.
It came up today. it came today because of the whole this whole kerfuffle that happened between Bogosian and the Kremlin, and he's like, "See, there you go. No other alternative is ever going to survive the American censor."
Right. Yeah. No, I mean,
But of course, nothing happening wins in the
immigration.
end, though.
Yeah,
Nothing happening always wins. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Levantine immigration bros. Did we get too cocky? Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, he's a nice guy in person. He's a
I'm
good
sorry
guy
if I'm putting you on the spot, my friend.
No,
I'm sorry,
listen.
man.
What I would say to you and what I would say to Richard is like, look, he wrote an article about me where he cast me as like Brahmanler. He gave me the name Brahman. Have you seen this? It was like he crashes.
Brahman Austrian painter for YouTube purposes. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can bleep that out. And he offered, he made this pretend argument that I don't make about immigration, and he kind of misrepresented what I think, and I will have to respond to him in a friendly way, of course. But no, I mean, I think Richard, and then also our dear friend Anatoly Karlin,
yes.
They look at Carlin's way of articulating this is, I think, much better than Richard's. Even though Richard, he has wonderful writing of his own, but I think on this particular issue, Carlin has a little more clarity. Carlin's take is kind of like, you need to look at what elite human capital gravitates to.
Yeah.
And you need to look at what kind of things they prefer. Because when elite human capital structures and organizations and will come into contact with other things, they win. And it's like,
but
well, I mean, so in terms, let's say post-Soviet Union collapse. Look at the scoreboard between Russia. And NATO.
Yeah. If you're going for the 1990s, you're right.
Yeah, it's like
onwards,
it's just and how did this happen? There are lots of gay pride flags at NATO headquarters, right? I'm not saying that I've been there. I'm not saying that I haven't. But it's like to look at Russia as the society that wants to project itself as, we are doing return with a V, right? We're building the cathedrals to the military. We're banning the we're based and red-pilled ortho bros, right? Russia is very consciously doing this. Richard Spencer has this silly take where he thinks it's like, it's Putin trying to appeal to American conservatives. It's like,
no,
I don't think so.
Because American conservatives feel like they're not appealing to them, like when they talk about geopolitical decolonization and they have to like African countries and stuff.
They're really,
and the West is racism, and the West we're Austrian painter.
Ukraine, it's like they're really not trying to appeal to like the Marjorie Taylor Greene supporter.
The MAGA chuds.
They're trying to appeal to Saudis. They're trying to appeal to Indians. They're trying to appeal to Chinese, and
Modi really likes the Kremlin. So
it's like they're trying to project this idea of return, and the Western, the Atlanticists in the Russian terminology, the West, the NATO, NAFO, all these people. What are they projecting? They're like the trans woman saying, haha, I have a JDAM. It's like that kind of thing has fundamentally won over 30 years of NATO versus Russia, right?
Right.
And
there are a variety of reasons for this. Very complicated, but and
it is, and it's like, but like, what is the net? The net that Carlin would say is, look, there are certain things that elite human capital wants, and it's not an oppressive megatrad return to tradition environment. They want immense personal latitude. They want immense comfort. They want, material bounty, and liberalism gives them that, and non-liberalism doesn't give them that.
Well, and until it doesn't, but then
right. But it's like so then the rejoinder to this is, okay, what you're saying is elite human capital prefers high degrees of freedom, many degrees of freedom. Inherently, what you're saying is elite human capital wants a world it can navigate very ably, even if it has lots of negative externalities, even if it has the opportunity for total obliviation, right? Like, the fact
for total cultural erasure and nihilism.
It's like you can be whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. Okay, well, trans people heard that. It's like I can be whoever I want to be, even a pretty woman. It's like, I guess that's kind of what that implies, right? It's like, to some degree, having total freedom invites disaster. Excellence is always a subset of all possible outcomes.
Right. Yeah.
It's a particular result. It's not a result in the aggregate. And so you need
People
constraints.
people forget that meritocracy implies the other end as well, which people,
Yeah. It's like, you have to constrain action and sustain action in order to achieve things. Achievement is not, high entropy. It's like, it's not entropically favored,
Right.
to have even to have a house of cards, the reason that's a shaky situation is because it's a house of cards, not because it's cards spilled over a table, right? And so I think this idea that elite human capital gravitates towards liberalism. Liberal societies seem to be market dominant, and they seem to just always win, and therefore they're actually correct. I have to respect power. I think that's true only in a very local way, and in the long run, it is simply not the case. I think in the long run, the demands that liberalism makes, and you can see what liberalism has done to America. It's Americans, the U.S. is a polity designed from the ground up to be a liberal country, a capital L liberal country.
As much as people don't want to admit it, but that's
yeah, it's like that's what the whole founding is about, and you can see what it has done to Americans over almost 250 years now, and it's just brutal. It's just brutal, and now it's in the process of just replacing them, having chewed them up so badly, and it's like, what is this thing? It's just, it survives. It's this egregore. It's this tulpa. It's this weird aggregate organism that just sort of feeds on the biostock of its people, and then spits them out, and moves on. And
it's the force of the outside coming into being that sort of chews up human capital in its wake and then moves.
It's like dear Spandrel had that wonderful phrase, IQ shredder.
Yeah, the Nick Land expanded upon, but Spandrel, I believe, created the
it's like, look at Singapore. Singapore is also fundamentally based on capital L liberalism, not maybe Anglo liberalism, but like, Lee Kuan Yew was certainly motivated by markets and racial harmony and egalitarianism and meritocracy and all of these things. And what does it mean? It means that he pushed so hard to have more college graduates, and then the women became college graduates, and then they stopped getting married so often, and they stopped having so many kids. And it's like, Harry, you did this to yourself, and he even recognized the problem late in life. It was the thing that characterized, a lot of his national addresses, his National Day rallies, was like, we got to have more babies. What are you people doing?
Yeah, but Lee Kuan Yew, I think, for his credit, though, was a visionary, because how do you navigate a diverse multicultural society? I mean, you need some, like, in this, Spandrel and Nick Land says, you need a level of like authoritarian control to like weed out antisocial behavior, to like weed out subway incidences.
It's like when you do have total freedom and you do have diversity, you have to have some level of authority, right? That's the constraints that we're talking about.
Antisocial behavior can't be tolerated in any respect whatsoever.
And so when the self-policing is no longer there, you have to have the external policing. But then it's like, in the same way that Singapore and South Korea and Japan, Japan I'm actually pretty bullish on. I think there's some selection effects and some nationalism and patriotism that'll see them through. But it's like, the whole world. Do you remember this? Do you remember this song Gangnam Style? To the listeners, I promise this is not a non sequitur. So Gangnam Style is this song that is basically lampooning the kind of materialistic, showy, nowhere people of the Gangnam district of Seoul in South Korea, where it's like, just their whole lives are about indulgence and convenience and drinking coffee, and it's just
it's a non-people, a non-place, to use the Mark like global airport.
So that song is him making fun of those people. It's actually a really it's a great track for that. It's awful to listen to, but it's very funny. And that Everywhere's future is like that. Everywhere's future is like that, or like even San Francisco, where it's like, these, more dogs than babies, so many
Well,
smart
that's what
people,
I'm
and none of
like.
them are going to reproduce. And it's
Yeah,
like,
like even aesthetically, like this is what my book I'm writing about, the neoliberal kitsch. I mean, that's the essence of it right there. It's like, how do you envision art in the 21st century after the calamity of this collapse of like signifiers within civilization, within the sort of symbols, artistic symbols itself? But it's like, yeah, you're right. Like it. So, but to get back to that mentality of like, I guess you would say like neo-rationalism. Like you were saying, like the future of that thesis won't be as secure as say
it won't.
Carlin or Hanani or whoever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they in in their own lifetimes, they've seen it do very well for them, right? And like,
yes, of course. Yeah,
frankly, so have many of us, right?
yeah,
Anyone that has a job that involves a computer has seen it do well for them. But in the long run, it's like without real solid constraints, you'll just have chaos. You'll have chaos, and you won't have regeneration of the thing that made it possible in the first place.
right.
It's like, I think DC might be the lowest in terms of TFR per American cities, but I think San Francisco is like number 2 or number 3
Oh
after it.
God,
And it's like,
TFR. Oh my, yeah. You
yeah,
know, but it's no, but like but weed this into the point about the IQ shredder though, because
yeah, and
that,
so
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
if you really do allow high IQ people to do whatever they want and completely indulge themselves, it turns out early marriage and reproduction of their talents is not one of those things.
yes.
It's like, in fact, a substantial number of them will just become trans. Right?
Well,
It's
yeah,
like,
or they'll like
see,
have like
yeah,
YIMBY, or what do they call that dual income? No,
dank,
dinks. Yeah,
danks,
dinks.
danks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, they live lives isomorphic to gay couples in Castro, right? It's like,
So yeah,
it's
exactly.
yeah, and so
We're going down to Ryerson, the neighborhood here out near Toronto, in
oh
Canada.
boy.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah, no,
boy.
the based boomer Steve Saylor has noted this, where he's like, there's a great paper that you can read. The guy's last name is Brown, and the paper is called "Flight into Hypermasculinity."
I think I've heard of this, but yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and
Yeah.
it's this phenomenon of these like high IQ, disagreeable, masculine men. Katie Tur's dad is one of these people. The Pritzker family produced one of them. You see, there's this meme of all of these American, Kristen Beck, Navy SEAL. It's like, one Navy SEAL becoming into trans is like it's a fluke. 2 is it's a phenomenon. 3, it's like that's a trend. There's this will to power and like Faustian spirit thing. It's like, that's kind of what these people are.
They
So it's like,
they deterritorialize all space. They even deterritorialize themselves eventually.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, James Poulos' idea of like the cyborg technocracy.
Yeah.
Mary Harrington's idea of the meat Legos. It's like,
All of life becomes this sort of like I mean, it's even Deleuzian in a way. Like it becomes this very like rhizomatic thing where it's like you're just building blocks that you can rearrange and shape, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so that's like the real problem with quote these people, right? Is like, without constraints, without the Kshatriya jock nerd dynamic where they get shoved into the lockers every so often, shit can really get out of hand.
Yeah. They
no.
need sort of like an aristocracy to guide them who are attuned to like civilization's heart more than abstractions, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And so it's like, I really don't think that you can have these sort of different castes. I really don't think you can have them all on their own. They kind of need one another. These are just fundamental tendencies within people, obviously partly genetic, partly cultural, and they just sort of they need to work in tandem with each other. And to the extent that they don't, you get all sorts of just completely ludicrous. You get degeneracy, you get decay, you get the fentanyl crisis, you get the opiate crisis, you get the
shredding of human stock, like you were saying, the Sudras, like they're being decimated right now.
Yeah, they're just being eliminated, right?
Yeah.
Even if their fertility is intact, the family structures are just all gone, right? And it's like, so.
Well, because the boomer dad that was a waste management expert, he sends his daughter and his son off to college, and then they're in a polyamorous polycule.
We really can't navigate individuals are kind of okay at administering individual lives. They're not
Yeah.
great. Not, I mean, look at credit card debt. Look at obesity rates. Look at teeth decay, right?
That's very
Every,
true.
every 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 dentist in the world is like, how come people don't floss? And it's like, sorry, man. People are okay at administering their own lives. They're not great, but without real hierarchical defined leadership and defined roles in the world, societies they spin out like this. And
Yes.
and so, yeah, I guess, there are a lot of really contemptible, terrible people in Silicon Valley. And they have a very high opinion of themselves. Sorry, right? But but it's still worthwhile, I think, working in tandem in a collegial way, not necessarily a family way, but in a collegial way.
Yeah. I have a few more questions about Silicon Valley, but yeah, finish your point. Are you?
No, that's kind of it.
I have a few more questions for you, but also the obesity thing. But now they mentioned the IQ shredder, which is the thesis that as time goes on, specialization goes on, people's will acclimatize to the top of society, but yet they don't tend to have children. And then you have a mass of people that do have children that are, like, frankly, let's face it, low IQ. Also having other selection pressures in, like, modern globalized North America. That's another thing. I mean, he was talking about Singapore, but let me ask you, because a lot of your writing and a lot of your posting on Twitter is sort of, I guess, related to this question. Let me ask you very bluntly, how do you solve this? How do you get rich, smart people to have children? Because recently, for example, that has come back again, these studies about how rich people prefer, like, I know this is such a vulgar, stupid example, but rich people apparently are not like breast pilled. They prefer small breasted women in Silicon Valley. Rich people.
Yeah.
I had this post once. I had to delete it though a few years ago because some irony leftist quote tweeted me where I said, like, well, it's because it's archetypal. It's Jungian. It's larger breasts are connected more to, like, the proletarian people because it's, like, indicative of life and nurturing and so forth.
I don't think that's
yeah.
what it is. I think it's the how do I phrase this politely? I think it's the aristocratic predilection for neotenous traits.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, no, but it's true. It's true. It's on a spiritual level, even.
Read into that what you will.
Yes.
It's not Epstein's Cougar Island. I mean, look, how do you get? I don't even want to say rich, but it's like, how do you get
successful, high IQ people? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you look? I'll just the genes for spaceflight are not evenly distributed. Okay,
right.
Like I think everyone in the world can agree if I say the genetic precursors of the ability to fly into space and sustain space colonization are not equally distributed among all life on this planet.
Well,
okay?
my aunts especially would probably agree with that.
The great apes are not going to go to space. Tigers are not going to go to space. Snakes are not going to go to space. If they do, it's because we put them on the spaceships. They're not going to build the spaceships. They're not going to build the spaceport.
Like the Russian cosmonaut dog, like the dog that died.
Yeah, Laika was probably a very, moment of silence for Laika.
Yeah.
Laika was probably a very smart dog, but poor little Laika, she did not build the spacecraft that she went up in, right? And it's like, how do you make sure that how do you make sure that people who they have the genes, they have the culture, they have the society, they have the precursors for doing great stuff? How do you make sure they don't become indulgent and useless and just effectively sterilize themselves? How do you
or like fail sons, like high IQ, low achievers? That's a reality nowadays.
Yeah. Like how do you make sure that doesn't happen? And I think at a very fundamental level, you have to motivate the young men with essentially access to women, and you have to motivate the young women with access to high quality men, which is to say, when people choose who they're going to date or marry, or people who find it very easy to get a date or whatever, right? Like, what is it that they find attractive, right? Do people find stupid people attractive? No. Do people find low self-control people attractive? No. Do people find overweight, dumb, poor people exist, and they tend to assortively mate with one another because everyone else who isn't overweight or dumb or poor or all three is kind of like, I don't really want to have anything to do with that. But the problem is they don't necessarily marry on time to have something to do with each other. They don't necessarily have as many kids, right?
Right.
There's this horrific graph from the American Community Survey of essentially income and TFR, and it's U-shaped. It's just like it's a parabola, and it's like people at the very lowest incomes in the United States and people at the very highest incomes in the United States have replacement rate fertility, and
Right.
everyone in the middle is on this declining curve up until I think about 200 300,000 a year, and then this slightly inclining curve until you get into the millions, but they're still low in fertility. And it's like that is a bonfire of all of the genetics that you need to build civilization.
That's a
Because
demographic Hiroshima right there to
yeah, it's just it's and once you do that, like you can't it takes evolutionary timescales to get back to that.
right.
It takes it took a lot of winters, a lot of hard winters, and a lot of migrations, and a lot of if you are alive, and I don't care who you are, if you're listening to this, you're alive. If you have an opinion about what I'm saying, you're alive. Okay, even if you think I'm a piece of shit, disagree with me, and you think I'm a fascist, you are alive because of an unbroken chain of people trying to exist.
Yes.
You are the result of this millions of years old struggle for survival, and to not carry that forward is it's there are no words to describe it. It is horrifically sinful to annihilate that story because you're too busy, or because you don't have the time, or because going to the gym is too hard, or because women are being dumb online. Yeah, women are, sure, right? Like whatever, man, right? Like to annihilate that, to wipe that out is just it's unconscionable, and I think you'll regret it. And so
we live in a society of late bloomers. Even like this year, I turned 30. I'm starting to be more health conscious and working out, and I've achieved some level of independence.
Hell yeah,
in
brother.
What I do, so it's like
awesome.
But I feel like modernity is like basically punished the late bloomer, especially the sensitive young man who's crawling from this like decay. And I mean, maybe I'm just romanticizing it, but it seems talk about this like the late bloomer, but also like I think we haven't addressed the question of like how do you make smart people have more children? It seems like an impossible task.
They're sort of both in the same. Look, it's like
yeah, they are. Yeah.
They're kind of both in the same boat, where it's like whether someone feels very, very capable, and they're doing the dink thing and just amusing themselves in a city that's filled with homeless people and billionaires, or whether they don't feel very capable and whether they feel very put on by the world. And it's like, how do I even talk to women? Like they're both kind of in the same boat, where if they don't fix they're gonna end. Yeah, their line is going to end. And so there are different things going on that they need to do, but they both need to do those things. And the kind of the late bloomer, maybe I have great affection for the incels.
Women now are late bloomers.
Even women, yeah, even women are femcels now, right? It's like there are no male safe spaces. The women just infiltrate all of them. Yeah, it's like what happens is it's like we get so wrapped up in wasting time, amusing ourselves, choosing comfort over difficulty. We're very self-indulgent, and personal transformation always requires deprioritizing comfort. You have to not seek comfort all the time in order to grow, right? If you're lifting weights, that burn that you feel afterwards, you've actually destroyed some of your muscle cells, and you're
Yeah.
gonna rebuild them. Take a shower, but chug some protein afterwards, right? It's like you have to literally break and rebuild yourself. Everything is like this, and it's everything that you want is on the other side of action, is on the other side of a little bit of discomfort. And that discomfort for kind of the well-to-do, self-obsessed, indulgent, quote, smart people, is that they have to kind of understand that, doing whatever they want for the rest of their lives is not that important. And setting up children that they have to raise them to be, smart young people who will replace them because they're
The
gonna
futures of
die.
civilization. Yeah.
That's actually a little bit more important. The well-being of 15-year-olds is more important than the well-being of 65-year-olds, right? It's like this is every
Right.
Zoomer complaint about the boomers. Yeah, that's true at other ages too.
No,
The
exactly.
well-being of babies is a little bit more important than the indulgences of 30-year-olds. It's like maybe you won't go on all of those vacations, right? maybe
Yeah.
you will be at home.
Yeah.
And that's maybe that's uncomfortable. There's some discomfort involved there, but it's like, deal with it.
We're gonna get into the relationship dating. This is a good jump off point, but before I wanted to go to that, I had this question that sounds kind of like a stupid question,
Oh no,
but
no worries.
you're probably like the man to answer it. What is the difference in the sort of colloquial terminology that you find on Twitter, especially? What is the difference between like the rationalists, the neo-rationalists? Who are they? Are they just like big yud cultists? What distinct? What's the distinction there? And do the eyes wide shut orgy parties happen at Vibe Camp? What is Vibe Camp? And should we worry about this? Should we shut down Vibe Camp till we know what's going on?
There are, so I have not been to Vibe Camp. I would never subject myself to that. I am not and have never been a burner. I would, you will not catch me dead at Burning Man. It's not. Listen, the whole ketamine orgy thing, not my scene. But like, look. It's like, yeah, these are just sort of the very frou-frou, high openness, high neuroticism,
Yeah.
people, and they're kind of weird, and like, some of them are just great software developers. What can I say, right? Like, some of them
What
are
is
just,
a neo-rationalist though? What is a neo-rat? What is this?
the sort of the neo-rationalist, post-rationalist stuff is like, rationalism, liberalism, the Enlightenment. It won everything, right? It's just
Right.
completely won, and yet things suck. Where do we go from here? They're kind of reactionary in that way, where they're like, how did we get everything that we want? And the tenderloin is just being disgusting. And so some of them, their answer is, well, we just haven't quite created the frameworks and models, and we need to think about things. We need to do some Bayesian thinking and some
Yes.
blah 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 and all this. And like, those rationalists, they've been doing a lot of their just like, I'm increasingly thinking that blah 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 in my mental model, and like those people have just been going around in circles for a decade. And so the post rationalists like look at that and they're like, all that, but like,
Yeah.
and so that gives them kind of a right-wing tinge in that sense, where they're like these stupid hippies.
I believe that
like,
you were on the Night Owls where his future Moldovan citizen said like they're kind of racist, but they're not really racist. But now the post-rationalists, they're kind of racist, but they're like we're allowing ourselves a space to be a little bit racist. But it's
it's like, if a smart person sits down and they study evolutionary biology, even in a superficial level, they understand that different human populations have undergone different selection pressures, have evolved in different environments, and were separated by time and space for a very, very long time.
right.
And so they're not identical. They are simply no longer identical. They're the same species, but it's like, they're different branches. They're fundamentally different things about them in all sorts of ways. And some of those differences are cognitive. And this is something that horrifies the capital L liberal mind, because they want the parliament of man. They want everyone, they want the heavens filled with commerce. They want, they want everyone to just be, in the Lyceum talking about ideas all the time. And it's like, sorry.
The Lex
It's like,
Friedman, let's have a conversation. Yeah.
It's like, Congolese pygmies and Finnish computer programmers, two populations, maybe equivalent in size, maybe not. They probably have different cognitive talents.
Right. Yeah.
They clearly have different physical talents in terms of how much weight they can lift, in terms of how far they can run or swim. Nilotic peoples and Cham peoples in Vietnam, Nilotic Africans and Cham, Vietnamese, their arms, the average length of their arms and legs is pretty different, a Sudanese Dinka or something, and like a Cham Vietnamese, you can't build quite the same airplane cockpit for both of those societies. Okay. It's like, yeah, human variation exists. And so a lot of the post-rationalists, ran into the menagerie of HBD discourse on the internet, and they're like, oh wait, yeah, this makes sense, right? So
right.
And so they, if they have a sense of humor, sometimes they'll show up in a night owl space, right? But they're not really willing to, they don't look at the world and they're like, billions must die, right? Like they don't really.
They don't have a grand political project of it.
Yeah. And so it's like, can they be cringe? Yes. But are they quite based on certain things? Yes. And it's like, how do you work that into something? I don't know if you can work that into something. But go easy on them if they don't sign on to TND. Okay. Just like, total Nissan dealership. If they don't sign on to total Nissan,
nice day.
Yeah, if they don't sign on to that, cut them some fucking slack. All right, just like call your mom.
Did you see the Scott Adams?
I did.
Oh boy.
I did. Yeah.
So many of the Breaking Bad meme in the car. Walters, and he's like, no, Scott, what did you do?
Yeah. Just Mrs. Obama, get down. No, look, it's just behave yourselves, okay, guys. Like,
oh boy.
It's just be easy about it, right? Like it's that is not the Schelling point on which you're going to build a grand coalition of people who change things. Okay, right. I'm just spoiler alert for the next 20 years of your life. No one's going to agree to that,
But I think that before we get to the dating stuff, I said that was my last question with Silicon Valley. But what's very interesting to me is in the beginning of the Musk reign of Twitter, I said that, and again, because I'm a great scholar and fan of Byung-Chul Han, I said that basically Elon wants to wrestle the sea of data and the sort of global consciousness of data itself, of discourse, which is Twitter. Having been around a lot of these Silicon Valley types, does Musk have an ideology? What is his end game?
I don't. Yeah. I've never met the man. I'm an admirer of his from a distance. Look.
Does he fit like sort of post-rationalist dichotomy or not? Or like, does he?
I have no idea. There's no way that I could responsibly Right. There's do you remember during like the Trump presidency where there would be these guys that would go on CNN and be like, the way Trump walks down this ramp shows that he has dementia or something like yeah. I'm not they obviously hated Trump, but it's like there's something about psychoanalysis from a distance that I think is bad, right?
It's
like
tea leaf reading, or it's
Thiel. The reason I his this speech. He's written books. You can interact with Thiel in an intellectual way where at least what he's saying in public is, Mussolini has writings on fascism that you can interact with. Okay. You can,
a lot of them were ghostwritten by Gentile, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you can interact with at least what he signed off on. It's really hard to know exactly what, it's really hard to know exactly what like
Musk thinks and feels and believes about the world.
not to compare him to Musk, but like Antonio Salazar, right?
Right, yeah.
He has some public speeches, he has some stuff, but he doesn't like. There's not like it's not as easy to get a read of him, or the Kirchners, Maoism. It's like, what is Maoism? Like, what is really the philosophy going on there? He wrote prolifically. There's a whole. I mean, like, people in China dedicated their lives to studying Maoism, and it's like,
oh yeah,
we still don't really know. It's like it's not really coherent. Juche ideology. It's like you can study Juche ideology, but like unless people are really writing about their ideas in a concrete, penetrable way, you're either tea leaf reading or it's just like, Marxism scholarship is just this endless pit of people reading theory, and there are no conclusions.
After Althusser, and it's not.
Yeah. So I'm all this to say, I only have Musk's public statements and actions to go on, just like everyone else, and I think he is a classical liberal that, he looked around and it's just one set of people always fucking telling him what to do, and he was like, I think at his core, his basic calculation is that there are these cops that are always telling him what to do, and he's like, I don't have to do that. I work too hard to do that.
Yeah, but people are like read insane like connections into him, that he's like this, Hyperborean transhumanist fascist that wants to censor heckin' wholesome trans programmers, and he, it's like when he got rid of the Jennies, he said namaste before. So it's when he fired he fired millions of Jannies.
Yeah. When Elon Musk alighted on Market Street to fire a million DevOps engineers, his first words were namaste. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, man. I've enjoyed the hell out of Twitter since he took it over. He's got like obviously a very good sense of humor about it all. He is a Gen Xer, like he's clearly, he's a Gen Xer, so, but like, that's part of that generation's charm also. It's like they're very School of Rock coded, is what I like to say.
They're kind of gooberish in that way. It's like Musk will like answer, like he'll respond to like someone he probably shouldn't be replying to, like optically. He's like, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. This is very concerning.
Exactly. Yeah, no, but we love our Gen Xers. We love our base Gen Xers, don't we, folks?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, like, to underscore it, like, I do think there's an importance as to why he purchased Twitter. I mean, it really is the public square in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
It's speech and commerce are both information flows.
Yes.
Payments and speech are just kind of like, hey, this information, allocate it with that person. And to have something where the state and institutions and everyone else can't just do that is really, really powerful and important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I sincerely hope that the next thing that they start working on, which is, by the way, I'm sure why Jack Dorsey was working on it, with Stripe, or excuse me, with Square, is payments. I hope there's some amount of in-app. You have a little bit of it with subscriptions, but payments functionality, peer-to-peer money flow between users, where they're just kind of organizing their own markets and their own services. And Twitter isn't the seller of those digital goods at all. It's just a place where people find each other and talk to each other without fetter. I think that I really hope that that's the next thing that they start working on.
They make Patreon, but not shut down by the federal government. That's probably
right. Exactly. Right. There's
God. That's an ancient reference right there. Patreon.
Yeah. 2017 vibes.
Oh man, yeah, that's true. Hopefully it works out. Like his sort of like approach to multimedia, like wanting like a walled garden, total content system. I don't know if it's going to work out, but Tucker.
We'll see. I do think that Twitter/X can become the everything app. I think it really can.
Could. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get into finally the dating discourse. Did you see recently? I mean, everyone was going insane, and this is why I've slowly tried to divest myself of this type of discourse. But the trailer park
Yes.
woman, yeah, like there's this weird eroticism with like the that like working class wholesomeness. But
there's
then
there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, go rant on this for a little bit before before I have another good question. But
So like it's like at the object level, it's like here's the life of I think the caption is like, here's the life of a 22-year-old mom of 4 in a trailer park, and you see this. You basically see this young white woman who is a mom of 4 children, and it's like, it's very rare, I think, to see a white woman with 4 white kids. It's like this is an astonishing sight, and I think that a lot of conservatives just looked at that and they're like, you know what? Actually, I like
this is who got Trump into office.
That's like, I think this is good. They're like, wow, look at this. Like sort of like Daily Wire style. Wholesome Chungus conservatives were like, it's like.
But it's something very like there's an erotic charge to like the Trailer Park Beautiful type of. White woman.
I think that's also a little bit of the online rights thing where they're
that's more the online rights.
A lot of the
I want my dumb trad wife.
Where's my clueless 18-year-old that I can I mean, look, it's again, Zero HP Lovecraft is gonna block me, but it's like where are the women who don't need to lose some weight, right? It's like gotta get them fresh.
He had a great tweet that's capable, kind of like an Orrin McIntyre style point of discourse, where he said like next time you see a TikTok like e-girl, don't like pause for a moment, turn off this like erotic charge to it, and actually analyze it for what it is. And like, because then what happened was this woman has like an OnlyFans and she had multiplications and and
the thing that this thing that people saw where they were like, this is good, is they saw a young woman taking care of multiple children. Right. And it's like, that is a remarkably rare thing in the idea of a 22-year-old having 4 children was not an insane thing not so long ago.
Not even 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, but
maybe not 22, but like 24, 26, certainly.
Oh, definitely,
And the problem is it's a little bit like teen pregnancy. So I've written some about this, and it's
you have
you kind of need to do it carefully, but it's like this sentence. This is a 19-year-old woman who is pregnant. Okay, in 1950, the idea of a 19-year-old woman being pregnant without any other context, it's like, okay, well, does her husband have a job? She married. It's like, these are, to be a married mother who is expecting a child, it's like, that's not a crazy thing. Today, it's like, the path dependency, the things that happen preceding being a 19-year-old being pregnant in the United States today are not good things. And it's like,
like, I mean, within reason, outside of like religious communities that are married.
In general, in the United States today, it is simply true that on the whole, the circumstances that lead to an 18-year-old woman being pregnant are not ideal, right? And the circumstances that will follow and the ones she will be able to navigate are not ideal. It's very unlikely that there is a husband who is employed in the picture. It's very unlikely. It's like, but the thing is that the conservatives who just sort of instinctually react to these things and they're like, no, that's good, actually, they're right. Outside of context and on like a spiritual level, they're correct. And you can criticize them and say, oh, so you need to decontextualize reality in order to agree with it, and it's like, shut the fuck up. That's not the point. It's like, we should actually build a society where women in their mid-20s are married wives and mothers, and they have lots of babies, and they're very happy
Yeah.
to.
But I mean certainly like the notion of like I like being a millennial, like you're a millennial, right? Or you're a bit older
I
than that.
am regretfully of
A
that generation.
millennial. Yeah. So like basically women had the notion that they can't have a child before the age of 30, or even now it's like 35. And it's like, yeah.
It's like there are all sorts of different manifestations of this, where it's like, don't get married while you're too young, or like,
Right.
don't get married a virgin, don't marry the first guy that you sleep with, you gotta look out for your own life and happiness. And it's like, actually probably it's like, it's not what looking out for your own life and happiness will get you. There've been so many changes that have occurred that, like, I think where conservatives were looking at this and they saw like, oh, this is amazing, where they were, quote, simping for the OnlyFans option trailer park girl, is they
Yeah.
were really just fundamentally looking at the material fact of, a white woman in the West raising 4 white kids.
Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast, where every Wednesday there are interesting guests, amazing ideas, solo streams, and discussions on a diverse array of topics from art, philosophy, history, and more. The free version will be available both here on YouTube and as a downloadable link on Anchor and Spotify, as well as on Substack. Each week, the full, uncensored, and spicier version will now be available on both Patreon and Substack, where you will have access to the full archive of both Content Minded and of Giant Reviews, where I break down interesting texts every week, including other exciting paywalled articles and good content. Thank you all. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless. Goodbye. Help keep the content renaissance alive. Too sweet.